And I am a program coordinator for OneOp. It is my pleasure to welcome you to today's session on engineering food for warfighter performance. In case you are joining us for the first time, I would like to give a brief tour of our webinar platform so you can find your way around. Hopefully you are currently able to view the slides we are sharing. If you are unable to see them or have any other difficulties, please email us at contact@oneop.org for tech support. As some of you have already done, we look forward to having you join us in the chat pod for conversation and questions. Several people have already shared the location they are joining us from today. Please continue to do that if you'd like. To embed the chat pod so you don't miss any links or conversation, simply place your cursor over the shared slides. You will then see a toolbar pop up across the bottom of your screen. From there, click the chat bubble icon. When typing questions or comments, please be sure to select everyone from the response options drop-down menu so everyone can view them in the chat pod. Note that the slides and resources are available for download on the event page for today's session. We will be covering continuing education information at the end of the webinar, so please stay tuned at the end if you are interested in continuing education credits or a certificate of attendance. Closed captioning is available for this webinar. You can turn on the subtitles via the Zoom toolbar. If you need to step away from today's webinar at any time, please note that a recording will be available for review within 2 business days on the event page. Today's webinar is part of OneOp's Nutrition for the Tactical Athlete series. Tactical athletes are military personnel, police, firefighters, and first responders. The Defense Department alone has over 2 million active duty and reserve component members who are all considered tactical athletes. These professionals have unique health and nutritional needs. Use the QR code on this slide to view the series on demand to learn how the Defense Department meets tactical athletes' nutrition needs in the environments in which they serve and develop your skill set for supporting the nutrition needs of tactical athletes. Thank you for joining us as we continue our partnership with the Defense Department and the U.S. Department of Agriculture to expand the readiness, knowledge, and networks of the professionals supporting our military service members and their families. The views expressed in this presentation do not necessarily reflect the official policy of the Defense Department, U.S. Department of Agriculture, U.S. government, or OneOp. The mention of any entity or product is for informational purposes only. Today, I am very pleased to introduce our speaker, Dr. Erin Gaffney-Stomberg. Dr. Gaffney-Stomberg is the Chief of the Combat Feeding Division in the Soldier Sustainment Directorate and Secretary of the Combat Feeding Research and Engineering Program, where she is responsible for ensuring the Joint Service portfolio is aligned to service priorities and executed in accordance with customer needs. She leads a diverse team of professional scientists and engineers who are dedicated to the research, development, integration, testing, and engineering of combat rations, food service equipment technology, and combat feeding systems. She ensures that the organization is properly resourced and administratively supported to meet objectives and respond to all internal and external requirements. Dr. Gaffney-Stomberg has a bachelor's degree in dietetics, a master's degree in allied health, and a PhD in nutritional sciences from the University of Connecticut. Prior to federal service, she completed a postdoctoral fellowship in the biology of colon cancer program at the Albert Einstein College of Medicine in New York. She serves on multiple committees, including the Technical Cooperation Program, TP21 Nutrition and Resilience, and the International Cooperative Engagement Program for Polar Research Nutrition Subwork Group. She also serves on editorial boards for the British Journal of Nutrition and Journal of Nutritional Science. So I will now turn it over to Dr. Gaffney-Stomberg to start the webinar.
Good morning, everyone. Bethany, thank you so much for that kind introduction. And Before getting started, I want to thank the OneOp team for this opportunity to present to you all today, and appreciate all of the excellent support that has occurred behind the scenes to make this possible. All right. I just want to confirm that the slides are advancing on your side.
We are seeing them advance now, Erin. They're on your first slide, U.S. Army Combat Capabilities Development Command.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. By way of introduction, we'll move forward to the disclosures slide. I do not have anything to disclose above and beyond what was already disclosed by Bethany. I also want to acknowledge, before going into the presentation, I want to acknowledge all of the nutrition and food technicians and professionals that I have the honor of working alongside. I've been part of the Department of Defense in some capacity for about 13 and a half years, and I am continually amazed at the professionalism and just the dedication of our nutrition and food professionals and the work that they do to support the Joint Warfighter. And again, I'm honored to be able to present to you today on behalf of the Combat Feeding Division and the Joint Combat Feeding Research and Engineering Program. All right, what slide are you seeing, Bethany?
Erin, it hasn't advanced yet to the
Okay.
next slide.
Okay. All right, I apologize for the technical difficulties. It's not advancing on my side either. I'm seeing the engineering food for warfighter performance slide currently.
And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take back slide control, and then we'll try to reissue it. And if needed, I can go ahead and move the slides forward manually.
Okay, great. Thanks, Amy.
All right, so it should be giving you slide control again. It's not liking us today. It does show me that you're controlling it, but it's not moving forward. So I can move forward. If you just want to let me know when you're ready for me to go to the next slide, we can do it that way. Does that sound okay?
That would be great. Thanks, Amy. If you could
Okay.
move forward to the objectives slide, we can start there. All right, excellent. Thank you. So the objectives for today's presentation are to explain the unique nutrition requirements for warfighters, describe the types of operational ration platforms that are currently available, and then briefly discuss ongoing and future areas of innovation in feeding our nation's warfighters. Next slide, please. So the Combat Feeding Division is part of DevCom, the Army's Combat Capabilities Development Command, located at Soldier Center, which is one of the centers that are part of the DevCom enterprise. We have 3 locations, Natick Soldier System Center in Natick, Massachusetts, which is where the Combat Feeding Division is located, as well as the Central Florida Research Park in Orlando, Florida, and the University of Southern California Institute for Creative Technologies, which is a university-affiliated research center. So in total, DevCom Soldier Center is just under 1,000 employees, primarily government civilian employees. Next slide, please. Our workforce is very diverse in terms of technical and professional background, and you can see we've got a variety of folks with bachelor's degrees, master's degrees, as well as doctorates across DevCom Soldier Center in areas of expertise such as engineering, physical science, psychology, food technology, textile technology, all the way to biology, electrical engineering, and mathematics. Next slide, please. So before we talk specifically about combat feeding, I just wanted to provide the group kind of a 20,000 foot view of DevCom Soldier Center and some of the other types of technology work that occurs across the organization. So this is an aerial photo of our base. It's a relatively small base in comparison to other military installations. And that red box there is where the combat feeding complex is located. So across DevCom Soldier Center, we work in areas such as clothing and protective equipment, so uniforms, helmets, vests, etc. Human systems integration science, so training and simulation, which primarily occurs in the Orlando location, and then also performance, so individual soldier as well as squad performance. Aerial delivery, so work on parachutes, gliders, etc. And then expeditionary mover support. So we do work on both soft-sided as well as hard-sided shelters, containers, and tents. And then, of course, combat feeding. So broadly speaking, if a piece of equipment or clothing touches a soldier, chances are it has its origin or at least some part of its development within DevCom Soldier Center. Next slide, please. So the Combat Feeding Division executes the Joint Combat Feeding Research and Engineering Program. This is the only program for the entire Department of Defense that is tasked with research and engineering to support field feeding needs of the Joint Force. So the mission is to provide an operationally relevant research and development base to deliver solutions for evolving field feeding challenges. And so as depicted in this picture, our joint warfighter can be deployed in a variety of settings. And those settings impact not only their nutrition requirements, which we'll talk about in a little bit, but also the physical requirements for what those technologies need to achieve. So certainly ground-based operations is a large portion of it as depicted in the middle, but the program works on things like hatchable ovens for fast attack submarines, all the way up to producing tube foods, which are consumed by U-2 pilots that fly their missions at the edge of space. And those challenges are continuously evolving, just like the nature of our operational environment is always evolving. And so the program really needs to keep pace with that and develop solutions to provide nutrition whenever and wherever our service members will be deployed. The Army is the executive agent for this program, which is why we're located at an Army installation. But the program is overseen by a joint board where there's membership from each of the services that have a vote really to determine the direction of the program and what projects are worked. Another vote is from the Defense Logistics Agency. DLA is an important partner as they actually conduct all of the acquisition or purchasing of field feeding, both rations as well as equipment. Next slide, please. Just to provide a background and something that might be familiar to the audience, there are several food technology innovations that have their roots or history in the combat feeding program. And this is really due to the unique nature of operational rations in terms of shelf life requirements and nutrition requirements that's really driven the innovation, the technical innovation that's happened in the past and is continuing to happen. And so some of those technologies include those that have enabled dehydrated milk and egg products, converted rice, high pressure processed foods, which includes things like prepared guacamole and hummus, shelf stable, or at least stability that's longer than typical, dry yeast, pocket sandwiches, and you see a couple of examples there. So all of these products and more have their roots in technology that was developed or advanced within the combat feeding program. Next slide, please. So when we talk about operational rations, really it's the unique field feeding requirements of our warfighters are due to where they are deployed. So the operating environments are really variable. There's Arctic, desert, tropics. There's the logistics of moving the food and water. So the equipment that is needed to move that food to wherever our warfighters are operating. And then the shelf life. And so in order for this logistical supply chain to occur, the operational rations must have a shelf life of 1.5 up to 3 years, depending on the ration platform. And that needs to be at 80 degrees Fahrenheit. So from a food science perspective, this is a very tall order. It's very challenging to achieve that shelf life. And then there's the waste disposal aspect. So there's packaging involved in all of the food, and we need to think about reducing the amount of waste as much as possible so that there's less of a waste burden in the field and less waste that needs to be handled. Also, nutrition needs vary. So the type of nutrition that is required of our warfighters really depends on where they are providing their job or conducting their job, and also what their job is, right? So how active are they? Are they in a hot environment? Are they in a high altitude situation? All of these things come together to define what those nutrition needs are. And then ultimately, this is food and it needs to taste good and it needs to be convenient to consume. The package needs to be easily opened and the food needs to be ready with very little or no preparation. And we also need to have some level of variety because studies show that if there is less variety, that can have negative impacts on energy and nutrient consumption. Next slide, please. So in order to support the joint warfighter from an operational ration or field feeding perspective, the Research Development Test and Evaluation Program has 4 overarching goals. One is to improve the warfighter health and performance through safe, nutritious food provision. The second is to reduce combat load, which refers to how much load an individual warfighter needs to carry just from their food. And then class 1 logistics burden, that is the burden of moving that food provision across land and sea. And then to provide mobile and efficient combat feeding equipment. So the equipment needs to be energy efficient. We need to look at fuel sources, and we need to have the equipment the right size and capacity depending on the operational environment. And then finally, to protect food and water from contamination, whether that's incidental or accidental. We need to ensure that the food that our warfighters are consuming is absolutely safe. Next slide, please. So to execute this mission and achieve those goals, the division is organized in 5 teams. 3 of those teams work in the science and technology space, and those 3 teams are listed here on this slide. So the Functional Food and Nutrition Intervention team develops human performance enhancing ration components. So that team will work very closely with our human research partners that have the mission to define what the warfighter nutrition requirements are. And then we will make the food or the material solution to meet those nutrition requirements. So that team will develop nutrition interventions and matching placebos so that our human research partners can conduct randomized controlled trials evaluating the effect of a certain food or nutrient composition on warfighter performance. The food engineering and analysis team develops technologies that improve the ration components. And so they will do work on novel food processing and production technologies that improve energy and nutrient densification of the foods, for example, because our warfighters not only need energy dense foods, but they need nutrient density at the same time, which those 2 aspects are frequently at opposite ends of the spectrum when it comes to the civilian food supply. Our warfighters need to receive the most amount of nutrition from a calorie perspective as well as a nutrient perspective in the smallest footprint possible. And so that team really looks to develop and advance technologies that can enable that to happen. The Food Protection and Innovative Packaging team develops technologies for safer rations and better packaging. So, for example, areas of focus include identifying novel packaging materials that can reduce the weight and waste of that packaging. while still maintaining the safety. A large portion of the shelf life of our operational rations is due to the packaging material itself. The packaging material has very low water and moisture permeability, and that allows the food to be shelf stable, and also protects it from contamination. Some other work that team conducts includes developing sensors that can detect contamination in food and water, as well as technologies to mitigate that contamination when it is present. Next slide, please. We have two teams that work in the engineering and manufacturing side of the house. So after a technology is developed and advanced, it can transition either to the combat ration engineering and support team if it's a food product, or the joint food service engineering team if it is an equipment technology. The Combat Ration Engineering and Support Team is responsible for managing all of the ration platforms once they're fielded. And in a little bit, we'll review what all of those current platforms are. The one that is most recognized is the Meal Ready to Eat, or MRE, as an example platform. In order to provide that function, that team runs a sensory evaluation lab. So we have several trained sensory panelists. They undergo about 50 hours of training and regular cross calibration. And this allows the panelists to be able to evaluate the food from an organoleptic property standpoint. So that is, how does it look? How does it taste and smell? What is the texture? And they can evaluate that food before storage as well as after, and confirm that the food still is palatable and nutritious before and after storage. They also will conduct the field testing, so any potential food component that is being considered for insertion into a ration platform must be Warfighter tested and approved. So we have the trained sensory panelists that will provide that technical evaluation, but from an acceptability standpoint, acceptability, likability, it's really the warfighter that needs to provide that information to us. So that team will go out and evaluate through an operational test and evaluation the ration components and platforms with warfighters in an operationally relevant training environment. The Joint Food Service Engineering Team tests and transitions equipment for field feeding. And they do this for the Marine Corps, the Navy, and the Air Force. For the Army, that function occurs through the Product Manager for Force Sustainment Systems, or PDM FSS, and they are co-located with us here at Natick, Massachusetts. So we work very closely with them. Next slide, please. So I know this presentation is part of the Tactical Athlete series, and I like that definition a lot. I think people frequently make the comparison that our warfighters are athletes, but that comparison is not fully accurate, right? So civilian athletes have the benefit or luxury of knowing what their event is and what they need to prepare for and when that event is occurring. Our warfighters don't have that luxury. They need to be prepared to perform at their best at a moment's notice or with no notice, and be able to prepare themselves to successfully conduct their job in a variety of environments while they're going through multiple stressors. So there might be environmental stressors, sleep deprivation, and a variety of others that are all coming together. So those different stressors are really what determine a warfighter's nutrition requirements. So just as some examples, soldier load, particularly for the Army and the Marine Corps, results in increased muscle-related injury and soreness. Our warfighters are required to maintain or have enhanced cognition to be able to consume, if you will, a lot of information and make decisions very quickly. They might be operating in a sleep-deprived state. Their nutrition status may be compromised, that it might be due to effects of the environment, might be due to repeat bouts or repeat deployments. They may be subjected to higher prevalence of illness as they're in environments where they're exposed to pathogens that they're not typically exposed to. Body composition, they're required to maintain strict body composition and height weight standards. They need to perform both as an individual as well as part of the unit. And the nutritional interventions or strategies that we evaluate really are to optimize that performance, whether it is physical or mental performance in a variety of environments. There's potential bioactive or component ingredients, and those may be interacting within that food product, so that needs to be considered. And the benefits may differ from warfighter to warfighter. And so we work very closely with our human research partners that do the physiological work to understand how those different stressors impact physical performance and then nutrition requirements. That knowledge gets transitioned to the combat feeding program, and we use that to inform product development. Next slide, please. So the way that knowledge is transitioned ultimately is part of an Army regulation, AR 40-25. It's actually a joint regulation, so the Air Force, Marine Corps, and Navy numbers are on that same document. But this regulation outlines the nutrition and menu standards for human performance optimization. And as part of that, there's two sets of numbers, the nutritional standards for operational rations, as well as the nutritional standards for restricted rations. So depending on where our warfighters are deployed, the mission may dictate that they are not able to consume the NSOR requirement. There might be very limited ability to carry food or maybe limited ability to consume. And so for those types of scenarios, we have nutritional standards for restricted rations, which by regulation may be consumed for up to 10 days, no longer than that as the sole source of nutrition. But all of that physiological research informs this document that we then use to drive the products that we develop and meet those standards. The Office of the Surgeon General is responsible for this regulation and maintaining its accuracy. Next slide, please. So at this point, I'm going to transition to focus on nutrition and food for the majority of the rest of the presentation. So we'll talk about the key combat rations that are currently fielded and talk about specific aspects of each of those. And then the very conclusion of the presentation, I'll talk about some of the innovative work that is occurring currently within the program. So on this slide, you'll see a list of the key combat rations that are currently fielded. So the general purpose individual operational ration is the meal ready to eat, or MRE. We have an assault ration, the close combat assault ration, which just entered production in May of this year, so only a couple of months ago. That is a restricted ration. So again, going back to the regulation, that could be consumed as the sole source of nutrition for up to 10 days. We have special purpose rations. So the meal cold weather is an example of that. And you can see the photo there on the top right. We have a handful of group rations. So the unitized group ration heat and serve, unitized group ration A, and unitized group ration M. All three of those are 50 person modules, and then the UGR Express, or UGRE, which serves 18 warfighters. And we'll go into more detail on all of these in a minute. In addition to those baseline or main rations, we also have several supplements or enhancements that can be used in addition to any of the other rations in order to tailor the nutrition provision based on environment and activity. So there's modular operational ration enhancements, two versions that are currently fielded, the high altitude cold weather and the hot weather. And then I'll also in a minute talk about a third version that was recently transitioned to the Defense Logistics Agency. Next slide, please. An important resource for this community to be aware of, if you aren't already, is the Warfighter's Guide to Performance Nutrition and Operational Rations, as well as the Leader's Guide to Operational Rations. Both of these guides were recently updated this year to reflect changes to the operational ration platforms that are available, as well as the most recent nutrition research. This update was a collaboration between the Combat Feeding Division, the U.S. Army Research Institute of Environmental Medicine, the Uniformed Services University of Health Sciences, as well as the DoD Nutrition Committee. Next slide, please. So the Leader's Guide to Operational Rations provides an overview of the various operational rations and categorized into several platforms. For each of the rations, there's a description of the purpose of that ration, major characteristics, as well as nutritional data and preparation requirements. And so this is a good tool for leaders that need to plan for what that nutrition provision should look like for a given mission scenario. Next slide. So again, it's for leaders, logisticians, and food advisors, providing important information on the operational rations to support their mission planning. Next slide, please. The Warfighter's Guide to Performance Nutrition was developed with the individual warfighter in mind. So it provides some overview in the beginning of performance nutrition. What is performance nutrition? How does it relate to operational rations? And then also provides individual warfighters tools that they can use to determine their own nutrition requirements, because the operational rations need to be uniform. So it teaches them how to determine what their individual requirements are and how they might select components within a given ration platform so that they can meet their own nutrition needs, as well as whether they need additional on top of the platform. So an enhancement, for example. Next slide, please. So how it is used, the warfighters can develop a plan by reviewing information on the foods and eating habits and how those impact performance. And then they can analyze the ration components and mission requirements to develop an individualized performance nutrition plan. And you can see an example there, how it's broken down by activity level, giving general calorie requirements based on activity level and sex. And then you see the table at the bottom outlining the average calories per meal for each of those ration platforms. Next slide, please. Okay, next slide. Yeah. Amy, I'm still seeing Warfighter's Guide to Performance Nutrition. Has it advanced further on your side?
Yes, we're on the meal ready to eat MRE slide.
Okay, great. Oh, and it has caught up on my side as well. Okay, awesome. So now to go into a bit more detail on each of the fielded ration platforms. The MRE is the cornerstone of individual rations. It's used by all of the services, and this ration does meet the nutritional standards for operational rations, or NSORs. By regulation, this can be consumed as the sole source of nutrition for up to 21 days, largely due to reductions in consumption that start to occur based on menu fatigue. So there are 24 menus, but even with that, there can start to be just fatigue in terms of the number of options. To reach the NSOR, 3 MREs need to be consumed per day. Of those 24 menus, 4 of those are vegetarian, and we are currently working to make 3 out of 4 of those plant-based. They're currently all lacto-ovo but 3 will be plant-based in the near future. There's also an entree or starch, crackers, spread, dessert or snack, a powdered beverage that needs to be rehydrated with water, an accessory packet, and a plastic spoon. The MRE also includes a flameless ration heater that provides a heating option, and it needs to be shelf stable for 3 years at 80 degrees Fahrenheit, as well as 6 months at 100 degrees Fahrenheit. Next slide, please. This is providing a bit more detail on the information panels that service members can see when they open that MRE meal bag, because this is an opportunity to provide some nutrition education, and we worked with our partners at the Uniformed Services Health University to develop this education. So there's education on macronutrients, and then on the next panel, or panel 2, some really high-level education on the importance of recovery nutrition for performance. Next slide, please. More information. So this will help individual warfighters determine some of the sources or best sources of certain nutrients, which components within the ration are fortified or contain certain nutrients. Next slide. For the meal cold weather, this is designed to meet nutrition requirements for missions where warfighters are operating in extreme cold environments. And they optimize water requirements as well as prevent freezing of the entree. So the entree for the meal cold weather is freeze dried. And then the service member needs to rehydrate that entree with hot water. There's 12 menus for the meal cold weather. The entrees, as I said, are pre-cooked and freeze-dried, and then there's side items very similar to the MRE, so spreads and crackers, cookies, sports bars, nuts, candy, powdered beverage, and accessory pack. The meal cold weather does require a separate heat source. Typically, it's a small squad stove that the warfighter can use to heat the water. The average calorie content is higher, so 3 MCWs are still needed per day, but each MCW is about 1,540 calories per meal as compared to about 1,300 for the MRE. And that is because energy requirements are higher when operating in extreme cold. Next slide. The first strike ration is still in circulation now, but is being phased out. This is an assault ration. 1 first strike per day it meets the requirement. In this case, it's nutritional standards for restricted rations. So the first strike was really designed for the first 72 hours of a conflict. So before the logistics trail is set up, warfighters can drop into an area of responsibility with 3 of these and it's essentially a grazing ration, or it's all kind of eat on the go components. So there's pocket sandwiches, ready to eat tuna, energy bars, etc. There is no heater, and this is also shelf stable for 3 years at 80 degrees Fahrenheit. So 1 first strike bag is about 2,900 calories per day. Next slide. So the first strike ration is being replaced by the close combat assault ration. And this ration was developed in response to the future operating environment where there's anticipated to be large-scale combat operations where small expeditionary units may need to be self-sustained for 7 or more days without resupply. And all of our ration platforms were too bulky to meet this need, to include the first strike ration. So as a division, we worked together over a handful of years to develop a new ration platform. And this was transitioned to the Defense Logistics Agency and is now available for procurement. So similar to the FSR, 1 CCR per day is equal to a day's worth of food. From an energy standpoint, it's nearly identical to the first strike, so it's about 2,900 calories per ration. Currently, there's 3 menu varieties. They all include entrees, which is a change as compared to the first strike. So when we went through the initial operational tests and evaluations, And we conducted several focus groups and used a product elicitation method. When we worked with the soldiers and Marines, they were very, very clear that they wanted an entree as part of this ration pack, even if that meant a trade-off of a bit more weight and volume. So we reformulated some of the most well-accepted MRE entrees to be even greater energy density. And then there's side components that include energy bars, high protein items like tuna, powdered electrolyte beverages, just really focusing on calorically dense components to drive down the weight and volume of this ration platform. So this ration compared to the first strike is 17% less in weight and 39% reduction in volume. So what that means for an individual warfighter is they can now carry 5 days worth of nutrition in a 3-day footprint if you're comparing it directly to the first strike. Next slide, please. So the modular operational ration enhancement, or MORE, as I mentioned, there's currently 2 types that are fielded, the high altitude or cold weather and the hot weather. These are added enhancements that can be used on top of either the individual or group rations. It's not a replacement for these rations. So it's really based on mission requirement, so the environment, etc. So these contain energy-dense food enhancers that are easy to consume and carry. Typically, it's additional carbohydrates and electrolytes, caffeine components, and we collaborated again with USARIUM and the DoD Nutrition Committee to determine the nutrition needs in extreme environments. These also need to be shelf-stable for 3 years at 80 degrees Fahrenheit. Same with the CCAR. I don't think I mentioned that on the previous slide, but that's also 3 years at 80 degrees Fahrenheit. Average calorie content is about 1,000 calories per pack. Next slide, please. There's a third modular operational ration enhancement pack that was recently transitioned to DLA troop support. It's not yet available for procurement. Currently, the services are working on what their annual requirement is. That is, how many of these do they anticipate needing to purchase each year? And DLA will need that information in order to move forward with any contracting actions. But the need for this ration came out of initially a request from SOCOM, where there's a need to be able to have an enhancement pack that can be used by units that are undergoing very high op-tempo, energy demanding activities. And so this pack is designed in such a way that the components can be consumed during the activity to support performance. So those items tend to be higher in carbohydrate and electrolyte, whereas there's also components in that pack that would be consumed as recovery components after the activity. And those would be higher in protein, but still have the right ratio of carbohydrate to protein to fuel that recovery post-intense activity. Next slide, please. So group rations, and I'll go through these fairly quickly in the interest of time. So the UGR-A, or Unitized Group Ration A, provides high quality fresh-like group meals. So this is really like restaurant style food. So requires the ability to have a field kitchen where there is refrigeration and freezer storage. So you need to have a fairly mature field kitchen, if you will. There's both shelf-stable components as well as the components that require the refrigeration. They're packaged in modules that feed 50 warfighters. They consist of 3 fiberboard cartons, again with the frozen and semi-perishable food components as well. Next slide. UGR-M is used primarily by the Marine Corps. So this is a ration, a group ration that's somewhat a hybrid between the UGR-A and the Heat and Serve, which I'll talk about on the next slide, in that the UGR-M is a group ration, again, feeds 50 warfighters per module, but this does require a field kitchen and some mixing of the different components and preparation, but does not require any refrigeration capability. Next slide. So then the unitized group ration heat and serve is very similar to a group ration version of an MRE. So this is a completely shelf-stable group ration that just requires heating. So from an equipment standpoint, this requires the least mature or complicated field kitchen. So there's polymeric trays that contain the entree as well as the sides and starches and desserts. And then those trays need to be heated and then they can be opened and consumed. Again, fully shelf stable. Next slide. As we're thinking about that future operational environment where we've got small expeditionary units that need to be self-sustained, in that operating concept, you wouldn't have the ability to have a field kitchen. And so one solution to that is a UGRE. So if you have a small unit that still wants to be able to have a group meal concept, but does not have the logistical chain, if you will, to support that, the UGRE is a potential solution. So this leverages similar technology to the UGR heat and serve. So it's polymeric trays that contain the entree and starch, and they're stacked essentially in a cardboard box. So you can see in the bottom right there a box with some steam coming out of the top. So there is a flameless ration heater technology in that box, and there's two tabs that you pull, and then that activates the heater solution. You close the top of the box, and 45 minutes later, you have a fully hot meal for 18 warfighters. It has everything you need. So it has the entree, has the side item, the vegetable, has any serving utensils that you need, and you've got a nice hot group meal in 45 minutes. Next slide. I wanted to provide a couple examples of other nutrition solutions. They're not operational ration platforms, but nonetheless, they're nutrition solutions that the division has developed to support warfighter health and performance. One of those is the Performance Readiness Bar. We collaborated with the U.S. Army Research Institute of Environmental Medicine's Nutrition Division. They conducted all of the physiological research to understand the nutrients that were required during initial entry training to support musculoskeletal health. And so what came out of that research was that a food solution that provided the right ratio of carbohydrate to protein, as well as enhanced levels of calcium and vitamin D, was beneficial to support musculoskeletal health during that intense period of initial entry training, where our civilians are turned into service members and they're undergoing unaccustomed activity. And so the Performance Readiness Bar was transitioned. It was a rolling transition starting in 2017, but it contains calcium and vitamin D, carbohydrate, protein, and then it's available now in 3 different flavors: chocolate, tart cherry berry, and salted caramel. And it's offered daily in the Army, at least for initial military training. Next slide. Tube foods. So I mentioned in one of the introductory slides that the Air Force U-2 program needed a way to fuel their U-2 pilots that fly long missions at the edge of space. And they conduct these missions in a pressurized suit that really constrains their ability to consume any sort of nutrition. And so we work with the Air Force and produce for them each year tube foods. And so you can see a couple of varieties there: chunky apple pie, cinnamon applesauce, truffle mac and cheese. But these food products are produced in such a way that they can actually be consumed through a straw that is hooked through an aperture into the mask, and the pilot can consume nutrition during their flights. So these don't meet the NSORs or the NSRRs because they're really meant to be nutrition for a short period of time during those missions. But when you're flying missions that might be 12 or more hours, you do need some sustenance, and so we produce those. This is actually the only ration that we produce. All the others we develop, and then they're produced by industry once they're transitioned. Next slide. MRE Pizza, that was another innovation that came out of the program a few years ago now. It was a food that was very difficult to make shelf stable, but something that warfighters had asked about frequently. And we used something called hurdle technology to be able to develop pizza that could be shelf stable for 3 years at 80 degrees Fahrenheit. And that hurdle technology combines a careful balance of pH, water activity of the food ingredients, and then packaging, and a lot of trial and error. But ultimately, we were able to transition a shelf-stable pizza. One thing I did want to, you need that pizza. Someone in the chat is saying they need that pizza. Yeah. So the one thing I did want to mention is that the shelf stability of operational rations, we use food science to and the materials and the packaging to get after the shelf requirements, the shelf stability requirements, and preservatives are used as the last resort. So we will work on pH, oxygen scavenging, water activity of the food, and try to make the shelf stability occur through the food science side before adding any kind of preservative. That really is the last resort. Next slide. Optimized packaging. This is just showing some of the work that's ongoing, where we've got some early technology looking at compostable packaging and degradable packaging, which is very challenging when you're trying to maintain the shelf stability. I think I saw a question in the chat about what is oxygen scavenging. So if you've ever opened a package and there's a little sachet in that, that's an oxygen scavenger. So what that is something that essentially pulls the oxygen out of the headspace or the small amount of air that is in that package when the food gets packaged. So if you're think of like a bar or something like that where there's air space within the package. There's no vacuum that's pulled. So you'll use an oxygen scavenger to pull the oxygen. Let's see, next slide, please. Engineering of equipment. So you'll see these are examples of some of the currently fielded operational ration equipment systems. But some of the work that we're doing now is looking at expeditionary systems. So can we make the field kitchens smaller? Can we optimize the amount of trays? So in the top left there's a tray ration heater. Can we optimize the amount of trays that can be heated in one setting? What about insulated food containers that can be used to move the food that's either hot or cold, so keep it at temperature and get it out to units that are further in the field away from that field kitchen. So really a focus on expeditionary as well as really efficiency when it comes to fuel and electricity, etc. Next slide. From a food safety perspective, we've got work ongoing on sensors for contaminants. So looking at biosensors that can change color when they are exposed to different pathogens. We're also looking at novel decontamination solutions. So evaluating commercial items to determine whether or not they could be used on operational ration equipment or other surfaces. And we're specifically interested in decontaminant solutions that use less water. As well as provide residual activity. So the current gold standard is a bleach water solution, but this particular project is looking at ready to use liquids that can not only decontaminate the surface, but also provide residual protection against contamination. Another effort is using multispectral imaging of surfaces to detect contamination and then also identify ways to actually then mitigate it using UV or other mechanisms. Next slide. The other area that we're currently working is in support of untethered logistics, or what's frequently called assured provisioning. So when you think about our warfighters being deployed in potentially austere environments where we can't get food to them and water to them as easily. We're evaluating novel technologies that could potentially produce foods closer to that point of need or in a forward deployed location. So we've done some early work on atmospheric water extraction or harvesting, and there's others across the DoD also evaluating these types of technologies. So can you actually pull water from the air and use that as a supplementary source of water? Also looking at technologies to rapidly purify or desalinate water if it's sourced indigenously. Next slide. Um, Along with the untethered logistics technology space, we are evaluating biomanufactured foods or fermented foods. There are technologies now where you can use fermentation to produce high quality proteins. So fermentation has been used in food production for quite some time. If you think of fermented foods like yogurt or kombucha, this is using that same process of non-alcoholic fermentation, but using it to produce proteins. And so we are evaluating some of those. We're not working on developing technologies that produce the food, but we're looking at evaluating those ingredients for their appropriateness for shelf stability and use in rations, etc. Next slide. So there is a concept that was recently published by DevCom on assured provisioning or a forward deployed nutrition concept. So can we use biomanufacturing to produce foodstuffs closer to that point of consumption? And so this is fairly early work, but we are working with DARPA and others on the feasibility of really developing a way to produce, even if it's a portion of the food that is just protein or just carbohydrate, to be able to supplement whatever other form of nutrition is available in those environments. And so you can see a concept here where there could be a biomanufacturing capability in a forward deployed environment that might produce protein, or it might produce pharmaceuticals or other molecules of need for the force. And I believe with that, we can go to the next slide. And I know we're almost right at time, Bethany. I think there's maybe time for a few questions. I don't have access to the full chat, so if there's some that you wanted to call out, I'd be happy to answer those. And thanks everyone for your time. I really appreciate it. Looks like there's quite a few comments. Yeah.
Thanks, Erin. You'll see when you look at the chat, there's several comments that this is fascinating. And I agree. Thank you for sharing your work with us, and thank you for doing this important work. For the sake of time, and I know folks need to hop off, I'm going to explain to folks how to get their CE certificates, but there are a couple of questions that just came through in the chat. Erin, if you'd like to engage just in the chat pod there.
Sure.
So as shared at the beginning of the webinar, OneOp invites you to view the on-demand sessions from the Nutrition for the Tactical Athlete series. In a few moments, there will be a QR code on the slide that you can scan to view this session and the previous 3 sessions on demand and get CE credits for those. OneOp also invites you to join us in August and September for the Academy. The Academy is an annual event bringing together military family service providers from multiple disciplines to address a topic important to the military family readiness system. This year, we will be bringing together experts and professionals like yourself to address key challenges facing military youth well-being. Over the course of 6 weeks, OneUp will deliver a series of professional development opportunities, including an expert panel discussion and 3 webinars. And there will be CE credits available from CDR and from InCheck. Use the link that's being shared in the chat, and that's on the slide, to register for those sessions. We are also hosting a webinar on October 9th titled Counseling Military Families with Eating Challenges. which will be presented by Captain Ryan Farley, Chief of Food Service at Walter Reed National Military Medical Center, and Captain Brooke Gunnarsson, an H2F performance dietitian and nutrition educator at Fort Campbell. And we will put the registration link for this webinar also in the chat. For today's session, 1 continuing education credit is available from the Commission on Dietetic Registration, the American Association for Family and Consumer Sciences, and the National Commission for Health Education Credentialing. And certificates of attendance are also available. A link to the webinar evaluation and to receive your CE certificate is being placed in the chat. So you can use that link to complete the post-test and obtain your certificate. You can also visit the webinar event page to obtain your certificate. On the event page, you will find a purple continuing education link. And then after completing the evaluation, you will be directed to select the appropriate CE opportunity, complete a post-test, and fill in your name and email. And your certificate will be emailed to you. Please note that some email addresses will direct the certificate to the spam folder. So please check there if you do not receive your certificate. And if you have any questions, please email us at the email listed on the slide, ce@oneop.org. A recording of today's webinar will be archived within 48 hours to our YouTube channel, which you can access via the event page. And be sure to visit us at our website, oneop.org, to explore upcoming events, articles, resources, and more. You can also find us on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. We will stick around for a few more minutes for those who need to grab links or information from the chat. Thank you all for attending today.